This testimonial was shared with the full permission of Isabella Montenegro, formerly Isabella Santos, and all identifiable information has been changed to protect her ongoing privacy and safety. If you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, please seek help. There are organizations available 24/7 to support victims of child abuse and domestic violence. Testimony: the girl who pretended to be dead to escape her own family. My name is Amanda. I'm 31 years old today, and I'm going to tell you the most shocking story I've ever experienced. It's about my childhood best friend, Isabella, and what she did to escape a situation that no one, absolutely no one, should have to face. This is the first time I've told this story publicly, and I'm only doing it now because I finally feel safe enough to talk about it. The beginning of everything. I met Isabella when I was 7 years old. We moved to a small town in the interior of Minas Gerais, one of those where everyone knows everyone, where there are no secrets that last more than a week. My family had moved because of my father's work, and I was terrified at the idea of starting at a new school and making new friends. On the first day of school, I saw a girl sitting alone at recess. She had curly brown hair, huge green eyes, and was drawing in an old, worn notebook. Something about her caught my attention. Maybe it was the way she held her pencil with such concentration, or the way she seemed to be in her own world, completely oblivious to the chaos of the other children running and playing around her. I walked over and asked her what she was drawing. She looked up and showed me. It was a drawing of a tree house, but not just any house. It was elaborate, with small windows, a rope bridge, flowers in the window boxes. It looked like a magical place any child would want to live. "That's the house I'm going to have one day," she said with a seriousness that impressed me. "When I grow up and can choose where to live." That was the beginning of our friendship. We became inseparable almost instantly. We spent every afternoon together, sometimes at my house, sometimes at hers. Well, actually, she always preferred to stay at my house. At the time, I thought it was because we had more toys, video games, those things that attract children. Isabella's family lived in a big house at the end of the main street in town. It was one of those old houses with colonial architecture, a huge garden in front and high walls. From the outside, it looked like the kind of house anyone would like to have, imposing, well-kept, with an air of tradition and respectability. The Santos family was well known in the city. Isabella's father, Mr. Roberto Santos, was a lawyer and had an office downtown. He was seen as an important figure in the community. He was always well-dressed, friendly with everyone, attended church parties, and contributed to charity work. Her mother, Dona Helena, was a retired teacher and always very elegant. They also had 2 older children, Ricardo, who was 16 when I met Isabella, and Marcos, who was 14. To outsiders, the Santos family was the perfect small-town family. They had money, status, and were respected. Mr. Roberto was always invited to important events. Dona Helena organized charity teas for the church. They seemed to have everything a family could want. The first signs, but from an early age, I began to notice strange things about Isabella's family. Little things that, at the time, my child's mind could not fully process, but that remained engraved in my memory as signs that something was not right. The first thing that caught my attention was the schedule. Isabella always had to be home by 5 in the afternoon. No matter what we were doing, no matter if we were having fun, by 4:40 she would get nervous and say she had to leave. When I asked her why, she would always give vague excuses. "My mom doesn't like it when I come home late," or "I have homework to do." At the time, I thought it was just a family that was strict about schedules. After all, many families have different rules, right? But there was something in the way she spoke, a tension in her voice, that made me feel like there was more behind those rules. Another thing that intrigued me was how rarely she invited me to her house. When I suggested it, she would always make an excuse. "Oh, my house is a mess today," or "My mom has a headache and doesn't want visitors." After a few months of trying, I simply stopped insisting. The few times I went to her house, the atmosphere was, how can I put it, heavy? Too quiet. The house was beautiful, well decorated, but there was a coldness in the air that made me feel uncomfortable. Dona Helena was polite to me, offered me snacks, but always in a formal, distant way. Mr. Roberto, when he was home, greeted me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. And then there were Isabella's brothers. Ricardo and Marcos were strange. Not the normal kind of strange that teenagers can be, but genuinely disturbing. They looked at me and Isabella in a way that made me want to get away. I could never put my finger on exactly what it was, but there was something in their eyes that gave me the creeps. Isabella changed when I was at her house. The cheerful, creative girl I knew became quiet, tense, always looking over her shoulder as if she were waiting for something bad to happen. She spoke softly, moved carefully, as if she was trying not to attract attention. One time, when we were about 9 years old, we were playing in her room when we heard Mr. Roberto come home. The sound of the front door closing made Isabella freeze completely. She looked at me with wide eyes and whispered, "You have to leave. Now." "Why? Didn't he say I could stay until 5? Please, Amanda. Just leave." The urgency in her voice was real, almost desperate. I grabbed my things and ran out. When I got to the corner, I turned to look at the house and saw Mr. Roberto at Isabella's bedroom window, watching me with an expression that made me quicken my pace until I got home. That night, I couldn't sleep well. I kept thinking about the panicked expression on Isabella's face and the strange look on her father's face. But since I was just a child, I didn't know how to process those feelings, so I tried to forget. The change. As we grew older, the signs became more obvious. Isabella started coming to school with bruises. There were always explanations. She had fallen off her bike, bumped into a table, tripped on the stairs. For a 10 or 11-year-old, she was surprisingly clumsy. The teacher started to notice, too. One time, the gym teacher asked about a purple mark on Isabella's arm. She said she had fallen out of bed during the night. The teacher didn't seem convinced, but back then, we're talking the late 90s, early 2000s, people weren't as aware of signs of abuse as they are today. Isabella also started to become more withdrawn. She was still my best friend. We still spent time together, but there was a sadness about her that hadn't been there before. She stopped drawing those magical tree houses. When I asked her if she still wanted to have a house like that when she grew up, she shrugged and said, "I don't know if I'll be able to grow up." At the time, I thought it was just preteen drama, but now, looking back, I realize it was a cry for help. The rules at her house became even stricter. Now she had to be home by 4:30, then by 4 o'clock. On the weekends, she was rarely allowed to go out. When I asked her why, she always said she had responsibilities at home or that she was grounded for something. One day, when we were 12, she showed up at school with a cut lip. She said she had accidentally bitten it during the night. But there was something in her eyes, a pain that went beyond a physical injury. I knew there was more to the story, but she didn't want to talk about it. It was around this time that I started paying more attention to the adults' comments about the Santos family. My mother would sometimes talk to her friends about how tired Dona Helena looked, how Isabella was so thin, how strange it was that the Santos children never participated in church activities like the other families. "There's something strange about that family," I heard my aunt say once. "The kids are too quiet, too proper. It's unnatural." But the adults also respected Mr. Roberto's position in town. He was influential, respected professionally. No one wanted to cause trouble or spread rumors about such a traditional family. The awakening when we entered adolescence, things got worse. Isabella, who had always been an excellent student, began to have difficulties in school. Her grades dropped, she was often absent, and when she was present, she seemed to be in another world. She also began to change physically in worrying ways. She had always been thin, but now she was skeletal. Her skin had an unhealthy pallor, and there were deep dark circles under her eyes. She looked like a child who hadn't slept in months. It was when she was 13 that she finally told me part of the truth. We were in my room one Saturday afternoon, one of the rare times she was allowed to go out, when she burst into tears for no apparent reason. "Amanda," she said between sobs, "I need to tell you something, but you can't tell anyone. Ever. Do you promise?" I promised, of course. She was my best friend, and I would do anything for her. My family, they're not normal. They do bad things to me. My heart raced. I was 13, but I knew enough about the world to know that bad things could mean something terrible. "What kind of things?" She hesitated for a long time before answering. "My father and my brothers, they hurt me. And it's not just beating. It's worse." I felt my stomach churn. Even though I was young, I understood what she was implying. Isabella, you have to tell someone. A teacher, the police. No. Her answer was so quick and desperate that it scared me. You don't understand. My father knows everyone in this town. He's respected. He has influence. Who's going to believe me? And even if they did, he said that if I told anyone, he'd do worse things. He said he knows people who can make me disappear, and no one would ever know what happened to me. But Isabella, Amanda, please. I just needed to tell someone because I've been holding this in for so long that I felt like I was going to explode. But you can't do anything. Just be my friend. That's all I need right now. That conversation haunted me for days. I was just a teenager. I didn't know how to deal with such heavy information. Part of me wanted to run to my parents and tell them everything, but I had promised to keep it a secret. And there was something in the desperate way she had said it that made me understand that betraying her could have terrible consequences for her. So I started paying even more attention. I looked at the Santos family with new eyes, and what I saw made me sick. Mr. Roberto had a way of looking at Isabella that made my skin crawl. There was something possessive, predatory in that look. Her brothers, too, especially Ricardo, who was now 18, seemed to have a strange dynamic with her. I began to understand why she always wanted to stay at my house, why she got nervous when it was time to go home, why she had constant nightmares. It all made sense in a horrible, disturbing way. The plan. For the next 2 years, from the age of 13 to 15, I watched my best friend slowly deteriorate. She became a shadow of her former self. The creative girl who drew magical houses had turned into a traumatized teenager who jumped at the slightest unexpected noise. She began talking about death with a frequency that frightened me. Not suicide, exactly. More like a morbid fascination with what happens after we die, whether the dead feel peace, whether there really is a better place. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just not exist anymore, she once told me. Not having to wake up every day, knowing what awaits me at home. I would despair when she talked like that. I would try to cheer her up, tell her that one day we would get out of this town, that she could come live with me, that things would get better. But she would just smile sadly and say, "You don't understand, Amanda. They'll never let me go. I know too much about them." It was then that she told me more about what was going on at home. The Santos family wasn't just abusing her, they were involved in much worse things. Mr. Roberto's law firm was used for money laundering. They had connections to dangerous people, criminals who used the lawyers' special services to clean dirty money and keep their businesses afloat. I listen to their conversations, she told me, when they think I'm sleeping, when I'm doing my homework. My father is not just a respected lawyer. He works for some very bad people, Amanda. And my brothers, they're learning the ropes. The sexual abuse was just part of a much larger system of control and silencing. They were holding her hostage not just physically, but psychologically. She knew secrets that could destroy not only her family, but an entire network of criminals in the area. They told me that if I try to run away, if I tell anyone, they'll kill you too, she told me, looking me in the eye with terrifying seriousness. They know where you live, Amanda. They know your parents. They said your whole family will pay if I open my mouth. It was at that moment that I understood the true scale of what was happening. This wasn't just a dysfunctional family. It was a criminal organization using a teenage girl as a bargaining chip and a guarantee of silence. And it was also at that moment that Isabella told me about her plan. I was thinking, she said, with a calmness that frightened me, about what you said about the dead feeling piece. And I thought, what if I died? What if they thought I was dead, but I'm not? What are you talking about? I've been researching, Amanda, about how to fake my own death. I know it sounds crazy, but it's the only way to escape. If they think I'm dead, they'll stop looking for me. And if I disappear in a way that looks like an accident or suicide, they won't be able to blame anyone. My blood ran cold. Isabella, this is crazy. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. This is the only way out, Amanda. I've researched everything. I know how to make it look like I drowned in the river. I know how to disappear without a trace. And I know how to start a new life somewhere else. She had spent months planning. She had saved up small amounts of money for years. Coins she found, small amounts she could take without anyone noticing. She had studied fake documents, how to live without an official ID, cities where she could disappear completely. But I'm going to need your help, she said. Just once. Just on the day I'm going to do it. The preparation. For 2 weeks, I tried to dissuade Isabella from her idea. I suggested that we run away together, that we tell my parents, that we seek help from adults in other cities. But she had an answer for everything. Amanda, you don't understand. They have connections in several cities. My father knows police officers, judges, other important people. And even if we could get help, how long would it take to investigate a respected family like mine? How long would I have to endure retaliation while I waited for justice that might never come? She was right, and I knew it. In a small town in the 2000s, a teenager accusing an influential family of abuse would be met with skepticism, at best. And considering that they had real criminal connections, her situation was even more dangerous. Besides, she continued, if I just run away, they'll come looking for me. They'll come after you, your family, anyone who might know where I am. But if they think I'm dead, they'll mourn for a few days and then move on. I know my father. He's practical. He won't waste time and resources looking for someone who's dead. Her plan was elaborate but simple. There was a part of the river just outside of town where the current was strong, and there were several large rocks. People had drowned there before. It was a known dangerous place. She would pretend to have gone there to think or cool down after a fight at home. She would leave some clothes on the bank, pretending she'd slipped and fallen into the water. But in reality, she would have prepared herself. She had learned to hold her breath for long periods. She knew every rock, every bend in that stretch of river. She knew exactly where the current would take her and where she could get out of the water without being seen. I'm leaving town that very night, she explained. I've got everything ready. Hidden clothes, money, fake documents I bought from a guy I know. I'm going to take the 2 a.m. bus that runs along the highway. The driver doesn't ask questions if you pay in cash. And where are you going? It's better if you don't know. That way, if anyone asks, you can honestly say you don't know. What she was asking for my help was relatively simple but crucial. I was to discover her clothes on the riverbank the next day and alert the authorities. That would give credibility to the story and ensure that the accident would be discovered in a timely manner. Why me? I asked. Because you're my best friend. It's natural that you'd be worried about me and come looking for me. And because I trust you more than anyone in the world. It took me days to agree to participate in the plan. Part of me still thought we should try other options. But with each passing day, I could see Isabella growing more desperate, closer to a complete mental breakdown. She had gotten to the point where she couldn't eat properly, had panic attacks at school, and talked about real death as if it were an attractive option. Finally, I agreed to help her. The last week, the week before the accident, was one of the hardest of my life. Knowing what was coming, pretending to be normal, watching Isabella try to subtly say goodbye to everything without raising suspicion, it was mentally and emotionally exhausting. She spent those days doing little things that I now recognize as goodbyes. She gave away all her favorite books, saying she was cleaning her room. She wrote letters to important people in her life, including one to me, and hid them in places where they would be found later. At school, she hugged teachers she liked, thanked classmates for small kindnesses, made sure to say goodbye to everyone properly. To those who didn't know what was going on, it just seemed like a teenager being strangely sentimental. To me, every gesture was painful to witness. On Wednesday of that week, she handed me a sealed envelope. "Don't open it until later," she said. "When it's all over and I'm safe, a long time from now, you'll understand why it had to be this way." On Thursday, she showed me the exact spot where she would leave the clothes, explained again what time I was supposed to discover them the next day, and made me repeat every detail of what I was supposed to tell the authorities. "Remember," she said, "you came to me because you were worried. I was acting weird at school yesterday, talking about feeling sad. You decided to come here because you knew I liked this place to think. When you saw the clothes, you got desperate and ran for help. What if they don't believe you? They'll believe it. Teenagers drown in rivers. It happens. Especially teenagers with a history of emotional problems. And I have a history of that. Teachers noticed I was depressed. There's a record of it at school." On Friday, the last day I would see my best friend, she was strangely calm, almost at peace. It was as if, after months of despair, she had finally found a way out, and that calmed her. "Amanda, she said to me during recess. "I want you to know that these years of being your friend were the only happy moments of my life. You gave me hope when I had none. And now you're giving me a chance to have a real life. Are you sure about that? Last chance to change your mind." "I'm absolutely sure. And Amanda, thank you for everything." That was our last hug. The day Saturday, March 15th, 2008. A date I'll never forget. I woke up in the middle of the night with a queasy feeling in my stomach. I knew that at that moment, Isabella was preparing for the most dangerous part of her life. The plan was for her to leave the house around 5 in the morning, claiming she was going for a run, something she actually did sometimes. She would go to the river, put the plan into action, and by 6:30 she would be officially dead. I was supposed to arrive at the river at 9 in the morning. I spent the early hours of the morning pretending to be normal with my parents. I had coffee, watched television, and answered questions about my plans for the day with a calmness I didn't feel. Inside, I was a knot of nerves and anxiety. At 8:30, I told my parents that I was going for a walk and meeting friends later. I got on my bike and pedaled slowly toward the river, my heart pounding so hard I was sure anyone could hear it. When I arrived at the agreed-upon spot at 9 o'clock sharp, I immediately saw Isabella's clothes on the bank. Blue t-shirt, denim shorts, sneakers, just as she had planned. They were arranged in a way that seemed natural for someone who had quickly taken off her clothes to get into the water. But there was no sign of Isabella. I hoped there would be some trace of what had really happened, some sign that she had managed to get out of the water safely. But there was nothing. The shore was exactly as she had said it would be, as if a teenage girl had simply disappeared into the current. For a terrible moment, I wondered if the plan had gone wrong, if she had really drowned while trying to fake her own death. But I couldn't think about that now. I had a role to play. I began to scream her name, as any desperate friend would. I searched the shore, shouted into the water as if I expected an answer. After a few minutes of acting it out, I ran into town to get help. The investigation. What followed was exactly as Isabella had predicted. When I ran to the police station, hysterical, screaming that my friend had disappeared into the river, the reaction was immediate but predictable. The police chief, who knew the Santos family, quickly organized a search. Firefighters, volunteers, sniffer dogs, the whole operation you'd expect when a teenager from a respected family disappears under suspicious circumstances. They found the clothes exactly where I said they were. The current in that stretch of the river was really dangerous. There was a history of drownings in the area, and Isabella had recently shown signs of depression. Several teachers confirmed this. They searched for 3 days. Divers searched the river for miles. Volunteers walked the banks looking for a body. But they never found anything. On the 4th day, the official search was called off. The police chief stated that, considering the strength of the current and the time that had passed, it was likely that the body had been carried far downstream, possibly all the way to the larger river where it flowed, several dozen miles away. Unfortunately, the police chief told the Santos family and local reporters, cases like this happen. Rivers are dangerous, especially for young people who are not familiar with the force of the water. Our preliminary investigation suggests that this was a tragic accident. The Santos family's reaction was interesting to watch. Mr. Roberto made all the appropriate statements about losing a beloved daughter, about how special she was, about how devastated the family was. Donna Helena cried in interviews, spoke of lost dreams and a future cut short. But there was something in their expressions, especially when they thought no one was looking, that made me realize that Isabella was right about them. There was relief disguised as grief. There was a sense of problem solved. The brothers, Ricardo and Marcos, could barely hide the fact that they weren't really sad. They played the role of grieving siblings for the cameras, but I saw them exchange looks that seemed more like relief than loss. The fake grief, Isabella's funeral, or rather, the memorial service, since there was no body, was an impressive production. The church was packed. People from all over town came to pay their respects. Mr. Roberto hired the best florist in the area. The church choir sang beautiful hymns, and several speakers spoke about what a wonderful person Isabella was. I sat in the front row, next to my parents, watching this elaborate reenactment and wondering how many people there really knew the real Isabella. How many knew about her suffering? How many would have helped if they had known the truth? The pastor spoke of a sweet, intelligent girl who had been called home too soon. Schoolmates told stories of her kindness and creativity. Teachers mentioned her academic potential. No one talked about the bruises. No one mentioned how nervous she was around her own family. No one questioned why a seemingly happy teenager had accidentally drowned. Throughout the service, I kept my eyes on the empty casket and thought, she did it. She really did make it. But I also thought about how unfair it was that a 15-year-old girl had to fake her own death in order to have a chance at a normal life. How our society had failed her so completely that the only way out she saw was to disappear altogether. After the funeral, people gradually returned to their normal lives. The tragedy of young Isabella Santos became a sad story that people occasionally told, a reminder of the dangers of the river, a reason for parents to be more careful with their children. The Santos family went through a proper period of public mourning. They received casseroles from neighbors, words of comfort at church, pitying glances at the grocery store. After a few months, they resumed their normal activities. Mr. Roberto went back to work. Miss Helena resumed her charity teas. The boys began socializing again. Outwardly, they looked like a family that had suffered a terrible loss but was recovering with dignity and faith. Internally, well, I could only imagine. I expected them to feel at least some remorse, some guilt for what they had done to Isabella. But based on their behavior, it seemed more likely that they had simply moved on, relieved that they no longer had to worry about her spilling their secrets. My life afterward. The next few years were difficult for me in ways I had not anticipated. Carrying Isabella's secret, knowing that she was alive somewhere while everyone else thought she was dead, was an enormous emotional burden. I finished high school as if on autopilot. I did my homework, talked to friends, participated in activities, but there was always a part of my mind thinking about Isabella, wondering where she was, if she was safe, if she had managed to build the new life she wanted so much. I never opened the letter she gave me. For a long time, I didn't feel ready. Then I began to fear what I might find in it. I went to college in another city, partly because I wanted to get away from that small town where everything reminded me of Isabella. I studied psychology, perhaps as a way of trying to better understand what had happened, how our society could fail vulnerable children so dramatically. During my college years, I would occasionally come home and see the Santos family around town. They seemed to have adjusted well to life without Isabella. The siblings grew up, got married, had children. Mr. Roberto remained a respected figure in the community until he retired. Donna Helena kept up her social activities. For all intents and purposes, they were a normal family who had overcome a tragedy. But I knew the truth, and carrying this truth alone for so many years began to take a toll on my mental health. I developed anxiety, had periods of depression, struggled with relationships because there was always a huge part of my life that I couldn't share with anyone. The reunion. In 2018, 10 years after the accident, I received a letter in the mail. There was no sender, just my name and address written in cursive that I recognized immediately. My heart sank when I opened it and read, "Amanda, if you are reading this, it means that I have managed to build a life that is safe enough to get in touch. I hope that you are well and that you forgive my silence over the years. I am alive, and for the first time since I can remember, I am happy. I have achieved everything I have ever dreamed of, a life where I can be myself, where no one hurts me, where I wake up every day knowing that I am safe. I can't give you many details about where I am or what my life is like now, for obvious reasons. But I want you to know that each day of my freedom is a gift that you gave me by helping me on that terrible day. If you want to meet me, be at the cafe in Praca Central in Belo Horizonte on Saturday, September 15th, at 2 p.m. I will be there waiting, hoping that you have kept our secrets and that you are still the amazing person who saved me when we were teenagers. With love and eternal gratitude, I. My hands were shaking so much that I almost dropped the letter. After 10 years, she was alive, she was safe, and she wanted to see me. For the next 2 weeks, I could barely sleep. 1,000 questions ran through my head. How was she? Where had she been all these years? How had she managed to build a new life? Did she still look like the girl I knew, or had she changed completely? On the appointed day, I arrived at the cafe an hour early. I ordered a coffee and watched every person who came in, my heart racing at every female face that looked remotely familiar. At 2:05 p.m., she showed up. I recognized her immediately, even with all the changes. She was taller, obviously, with short blonde hair, very different from the brown curls I remembered, sunglasses, and elegant but understated clothes. She looked, well, healthy, happy. Our eyes met across the crowded cafe, and we both started to cry at the same time. The full truth. The reunion with Isabella was one of the most emotional experiences of my life. We spent hours in that cafe, crying, laughing, trying to make up for 10 years of separation in one afternoon. She told me about the first few years after his death. They were the hardest, she said. Learning to live without an official identity, getting jobs for cash, always looking over my shoulder for fear of being recognized. The first 2 years were a different kind of hell, she told me. I was free from my family, but I was constantly terrified of being discovered. I slept in shelters, worked temp jobs, moved from city to city every few months. But gradually, she had learned to navigate her new life. She found people who helped her, some who knew her real situation, others who simply accepted her without asking too many questions. She had worked as a nanny, a waitress, a cleaner, anything that didn't require formal documentation. When I was 18, I got better documents, she explained. I won't go into detail about how, but let's just say there are people who help people disappear when they have good reasons to do so. With a more solid identity, she had gotten better jobs, resumed her studies through adult programs, and started to build a real life. Now, at 25, she had her own apartment, a steady job at an accounting firm, and even a boyfriend who knew her real story and supported her. My name is Sarah now, she told me. Sarah Montenegro. That's who I've been for almost a decade. Isabella Santos really did die in that river, and I'm at peace with that. She had followed news from our hometown occasionally over the years, always careful not to leave a digital trail. She knew her family had moved on, that there had never been any suspicion that her death had been faked. My father died 3 years ago, she told me without any particular emotion. Heart attack. I read the obituary online. I felt nothing, no relief, no sadness. It was like reading about a stranger's death. And your brothers? Ricardo is in jail. Tax fraud and money laundering. It seems he continued in the family business after Dad died, but he wasn't as smart. Marcos moved to another state, has a normal family now from what I can tell. She had built exactly the life she had always wanted. She had genuine friends, a job she enjoyed, hobbies, plans for the future. Most importantly, she had peace. I wake up every day knowing that no one is going to hurt me, she said, and there was a calmness in her voice that had never been there when we were teenagers. I can lock my door and know that I'm safe. I can choose who I spend my time with. I can say no without consequences. Amanda, you have no idea what a gift that is to someone who never had those basic things. The letter. After hours of talking, I finally told her about the letter she had given me 10 years ago and had never opened. Do you still have it? She asked, surprised. Yes. I never got it. I never felt ready. She smiled, that genuine smile I remembered from our childhood, before everything got so dark. I was hoping you'd bring it today. Can I open it with you? I took the yellowed letter out of my purse. After 10 years, I finally felt ready to know what my best friend had wanted to tell me in those last days before she disappeared. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were 3 handwritten pages in Isabella's careful handwriting. The letter began, My dear Amanda, if you are reading this, it means that either something went wrong with my plan, or I have managed to build a secure life and can finally tell the full truth. First, I want you to know that everything you are about to read is true. I have kept evidence of everything I am about to tell. If anything happens to me, if I really die or disappear suspiciously, please use this information to ensure that justice is served. What followed was a detailed and disturbing account of the Santos family's crimes. Isabella had documented everything, dates, names, conversations she had overheard, evidence she had secretly collected over the years. She had photographed documents with her old cell phone, recorded conversations when possible, jotted down details about clients of the law firm who she knew were criminals. It was a complete dossier of a money laundering operation that involved not only her family, but dozens of others in the region. I spent years documenting everything, she had written. Not because I planned to report them. I knew it would be my word against theirs, and they had much more power. But because I wanted to have life insurance, if something happened to me, if I really did die, at least there would be evidence of the truth. The letter also included specific details about the abuse she had suffered, with dates and descriptions that were painful to read even 10 years later. She had documented everything as a way to protect herself and other potential victims. The evidence is hidden in 3 different locations, the letter continued. I know it's a lot to ask, but if you're reading this because something bad happened to me, please consider using this information. Not just for me, but for any other children they may be hurting. The letter ended with, Amanda, you saved my life in more ways than you can imagine. Not only by helping me escape, but simply by being my friend during the darkest years of my existence. You gave me hope when I had none, and you gave me courage when I needed it most. If something went wrong and you are reading this because I am truly dead, please do not blame yourself. You did everything you could. You gave me more love and support than my own family ever did. If you are reading this because I have been able to build a new life and can finally share the truth, then know that every day of my freedom is a gift you have given me. Whatever the case, thank you for being the best friend anyone could ask for. With eternal love, Isabella. We were both in tears by the time we finished reading it. It was a powerful document of survival, resilience, and friendship, but also a painful reminder of everything she had been through. Do you still have the evidence? I asked. I have a few. Others have gotten lost over the years, especially during the early years when I was constantly moving. But I have enough. Have you ever thought about doing something with them? She was silent for a long time before answering. I think about it every day, especially since I heard my father died. Part of me wants to make sure he's not remembered as the respected lawyer everyone thought he was. But part of me just wants to move on. What if there are still victims? Children they're hurting. That's what kills me, Amanda. That's why I still hold on to the evidence. If I knew for sure that there were still children in danger, I wouldn't hesitate. But my father is dead, Ricardo is in prison, Marcos has moved away. The network they were part of may have disbanded. It was an impossible situation. She had built a new, happy life, but she carried the responsibility of knowledge that could help others, or destroy the peace she had fought so hard to find. The decision. We spent the rest of that day and Sunday morning talking. It was as if we had 10 years of friendship to recover in 24 hours. She told me about her boyfriend, a kind man she had met at work, and who had learned her real story after 2 years of dating. She told me about the friends she had made, the normal social life she now had, her plans for the future. I'm thinking about going back to college, she said. I want to study social work, maybe work helping other kids in difficult situations. I feel like it's my way of giving back. We also talked at length about the evidence she still had and what to do with it. It was a decision that could affect not only potential future victims, but also Isabella's carefully constructed life. If I come forward, she explained, I will have to reveal who I really am. The whole life I have built as Sarah Montenegro will fall apart. I will have to explain how I have information about crimes committed by people I supposedly don't know. I will have to admit that I faked my own death. But if you don't report it, I know. If you don't report it, potential criminals go free, and potential victims continue to suffer. It was a complicated moral dilemma with no easy answers. In the end, we reached a compromise. She would give me copies of some of the most important evidence. As a freelance journalist, a profession I had chosen after college, I could discreetly investigate whether there was still criminal activity linked to former Santos family associates. If we discovered that crimes were still being committed, especially involving children, she would consider exposing her true identity to help the investigation. If not, she would continue her life as Sarah Montenegro, and the evidence would serve only as insurance in case something happened to her. It's an imperfect solution, she admitted, but it's the only way I can think of to protect both potential victims and the life I've built. I agreed. It wasn't perfect, but considering everything she'd been through, it seemed fair that she should have the right to prioritize her own safety and happiness. The investigations. In the months following our reunion, I began quietly investigating former Santos family associates. I used my skills as a journalist to search public records, talk to sources, and trace connections. What I discovered was disturbing but not surprising. The money laundering ring had indeed disbanded after Mr. Roberto's death and Ricardo's arrest. But several of the former clients had simply found new lawyers to continue their illegal activities. More troubling, I discovered evidence that at least 2 of the men who had been Mr. Roberto's clients were facing child abuse charges in other cities. Isabella's evidence could potentially help build a stronger case against them. When I shared these findings with her, I saw the conflict in her eyes. "I have to do this, don't I?" she said. "I can't live with the knowledge that information I have could help protect children." "You don't have to do anything," I replied. "You've suffered enough. No one can blame you for wanting to protect the life you've built. But I can blame myself." In the end, she decided that she would reveal her real identity and cooperate with authorities, but only under specific conditions. She wanted assurances of protection, she wanted control over how the information would be used, and she wanted to minimize public exposure. We contacted a lawyer specializing in witness protection who helped us negotiate with prosecutors in several jurisdictions. The process was long and complicated, but we eventually reached a settlement. The revelation. In 2019, 11 years after her death, Isabella Santos was officially resurrected. The revelation was carefully orchestrated to minimize media sensationalism and maximize the impact of the evidence she had. Instead of a major public revelation, the information was quietly shared with relevant authorities. Her evidence helped build cases against 3 men involved in crimes against children. 2 were sentenced to significant prison terms. The 3rd accepted a plea agreement that included information about other criminals in the network. Isabella's own resurrection was treated as a case of retroactive witness protection. Officially, she had faked her death to escape criminal threats and had cooperated with authorities as soon as she felt safe to do so. There was some media coverage, but much less than we had feared. The main story became the crimes that were exposed, not the girl who had faked her own death. The authorities did a good job of protecting her privacy. The surviving Santos family, especially Dona Helena and Marcos, were obviously shocked. Dona Helena gave a few interviews stating that she had no knowledge of any abuse and that she was relieved that her daughter was alive. Marcos made no public comment. Life today. Today, in 2024, Isabella is living openly under her true identity again, though she has kept the Montenegro surname she adopted. She is Isabella Montenegro now, a fusion of who she was and who she has become. She has married the boyfriend who supported her throughout the coming-out process. They have a 2-year-old daughter, a beautiful child who will never know the horrors her mother faced, but who will grow up knowing about courage, survival, and the importance of protecting the vulnerable. Isabella has gone back to school and earned a degree in social work, as she had planned. She now works for an organization that helps abused children. She uses her experience, both as a victim and a survivor, to help other children find safety and healing. "It's strange," she told me recently, "how the worst thing that ever happened to me ended up leading me to exactly where I needed to be. Not that I recommend faking your death as a career strategy," she added with a smile. She still has psychological scars, of course. She still goes to therapy regularly, still has occasional nightmares, still struggles with anxiety in certain situations. But she has a full, happy, meaningful life. And most importantly, she is safe. Final thoughts. I tell this story now, 15 years after that terrible day on the river, because I think people need to understand some hard truths about child abuse in our society. First, that child abuse happens in families that seem perfect on the outside. The Santos family was respected, influential, seemingly normal. No one suspected what was going on behind closed doors. As a society, we need to stop assuming that good families can't have terrible secrets. Second, that children often can't ask for help through normal channels. Isabella knew she wouldn't be believed. She knew her family had too much power in the community. She needed an extreme solution because the normal solutions weren't available to her. Third, that survival sometimes requires choices that others may not understand or approve of. Isabella chose to fake her own death because it was the only way out she saw. Was it extreme? Yes. Was it dangerous? Absolutely. But it worked. She's alive, safe, and has built a good life. Last, that healing is possible, even after extreme trauma. Isabella didn't just survive, she thrived. She turned her suffering into purpose, her pain into power to help others. I also want people to understand that if you know a child who is suffering, you can be the difference between life and death for that child. I didn't save Isabella. I simply believed in her, supported her, and helped her when she needed it. That was enough. If you are a child or teen who is being abused, I want you to know that there is hope. It may not feel like it now. It may feel like you are trapped forever, but there are ways out. There are people who will believe you and help you. Don't give up. And if you are an adult, be mindful. Watch the children around you. Ask the hard questions when something doesn't feel right. Believe a child when they have the courage to tell the truth. Be the safe adult that every child deserves to have in their life. Isabella's story is extraordinary, but what made it necessary? Child abuse, systems that fail to protect the vulnerable, societies that protect influential abusers, is tragically common. We can do better. We must do better. For all the Isabellas who are still suffering in silence, for all the children who are being hurt by the people who are supposed to protect them, for all the young people who are considering extreme solutions because they see no other options, we must do better. Isabella was lucky. She was smart, resourceful, had a friend who was willing to help, and had the courage to execute an incredibly risky plan. Many children in similar situations do not have these advantages. They need us as a society to create better systems, to be more attentive, to be more courageous in confronting difficult truths about respectable families, and to be more willing to believe vulnerable children. That is what we owe to the memory of Isabella Santos, who died in the river in 2008, and that is what we owe to the Isabella Montenegro who lives, thrives, and helps other children today. This is the story that needed to be told. It is the story of a girl who chose false death to find true life. It is the story of courage, survival, friendship, and ultimately, hope. It is the story of why we should never give up, no matter how dark the situation seems. Because sometimes, even from the deepest darkness, we can find our way to the light. End of testimony.